Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Divorced Woman's Guide podcast. How are you doing today? I am doing fantastic because I am here with Kristy Carruthers. Hello, Kristy. How are you?
I am well. How are you doing?
I am so great, and I am so honored to have you here today. So, guys, those of you tuning in today, I actually reached out to Kristy after reading her story in Entrepreneur magazine, and I was so incredibly inspired by her hard work, her tenacity, her mindset shifts, and her determination. And the reason why is because it truly reminded me of where I was 5 years ago when I realized that my marriage was over and the foundation of my life completely came out from underneath me. And so I wanted to invite Kristy here to talk to you all today, to share her story, and for us to also have a conversation around how, for every single one of you guys listening, anything is possible with the right mindset. So, Kristy, let me share a little bit more with our audience about you, and then we will dive into our conversation today.
Sure.
So through her company, She Corporated, Kristy empowers women to create the life and business of their dreams for themselves and their families. She is passionate about helping women start and scale their businesses with tools, training, and a community to support them on their journey. And I'm really excited for you to share your story with our audience, Kristy, because as I said, it is so incredibly inspiring. And as I read it, I went, oh my God, I see me in your story. So if you would, please share with our audience today how it is that you became, the Kristy Carruthers that I'm looking at today and created your company, She Corporated.
Sure. Thank you. I think it did all come to mindset in the end, but a bit of backstory. So several years ago, I had a consulting company for high-end jewelry, and it required about a week per month of travel. My daughter was 6 years old at the time. I was a solo parent, so it was tricky, but doable. We managed. But when I was pregnant with my second child, I realized this was no longer going to be doable. And I had started a new company. I'd started a promotional products company. And it was growing, but it didn't grow quickly enough. So by the time my son was born and I'd had to give up the consulting business, we just weren't making enough to support rent and everything else, or mortgage it was at that point. So things got tough. I ended up selling off basically anything we had of value, their clothing, jewelry, anything anyone would buy, basically. I got after my son was born, he was about 4 weeks old, I went and started interviewing for jobs. I have no idea why anyone hired me. I was, 4 weeks postpartum. I didn't fit in my clothes. I was like sweaty postpartum mess, but I did end up getting a job. I got a job in a radio station in the next town. So I started when he was 6 weeks old. I started working there. The daycare wouldn't take him till he was 8 weeks old. So my mom stepped in and took care of him for a couple of weeks. And then when he was 8 weeks old, I dropped him off at the daycare. Still makes me teary. It was tough, this little guy, and I didn't know who they were, but it had to be done. There was no other option. I worked at the radio station during the day and I did the best I could. And eventually, after living on credit cards for a few months, we just hit the end of the rope. So I ended up having to sell our house to pay the credit card bills. And that's really all there was left. All the profit from the house went to pay off the bills. So we had nothing. And we're literally homeless. We couldn't afford a home. I had to sell the house and I couldn't afford to rent anything. And the only thing at that point that kept us off the streets or from a program was the fact that my parents let us camp out in their basement for a few months to get back on my feet. And, it could have been so much worse. It could have been a much more difficult situation to get out of. But so we moved, I set up camp. I set up a desk in their basement and I would work the radio station during the day and I would, go back to their place in the evening. And then after the kids were in bed, I would work for a few hours in my business and keep trying to build that business. And I think that's when the mind shift happened. I think we all have this kind of buffer zone between where we are and disaster. And it's different for everybody, what's comfortable, right? Some people it's $1,000, some people it's $10,000, some people it's whatever it is. And I think that's when my mind shift happened. And I said, you know what, this can never happen again. This is not acceptable. So I reset what was acceptable for myself and my life and my kids, and what that buffer zone needed to be. So if that ever happened again, you ever had that unexpected situation or an illness or something that knocks you out of where you're comfortable, I wanted to be able to fall forever before we ever hit that disaster zone again. Right. So I reset my goals and what was acceptable, what was possible in my mind. And I did my first vision board. I'd never done one before.
Yeah. They're powerful, aren't they?
They're incredible. Honestly, I did it to make myself feel better. I needed to have some kind of vision. And so it was fairly modest. It was just a home, any rental that, we could call our own, and a garden I could, grow veggies in, and a kitchen to cook with the kids and that sort of thing. And about 6 months later, we actually moved into a place of our own. It was not nice.
But it was yours.
It was ours. It was in the worst part of town, but it was, somewhere we could call home. And after a couple more months, I realized I'd actually crossed everything off on the vision board. So I did a new one with a nicer house and a new car. And probably the most audacious thing on that was private school for my daughter, because the district that we were in this house being the worst neighborhood was also the worst school district. Within about a year and a half, we moved into a new house. We got the car. My daughter was in the school, and I'd really crossed off the list on most of those things on that second vision board. So, I think one of the things that holds a lot of us back, a lot of women back, is fear of failure. And I think what I learned from that experience is that, we hear a lot people say, you don't fail until you quit, right? You don't fail until you give up. And I think if you flip that and you look at your goal, my goal at the time, that company was actually a franchise, and they have $1 million club. And that's really success in that particular company, is when you hit that $1 million club. So that was my goal. And I had set the goal to do it within a year. Now that was a pretty, optimistic goal. I didn't do it within a year, but I also didn't give up. So if you look at that goal and you say, all right, well, I want to do $1 million by the end of next year, and you don't make that $1 million, what are you going to do? Are you going to quit? No, of course you're not. You're going to keep going. So there's no reason to fear that failure, because your failure, your success is guaranteed as long as you don't give up, right? As long as you keep moving towards that goal. So I think that was really the mindset shift for me, is it doesn't matter what the goal is, as long as the goal is powered by me and not by external forces, I am absolutely guaranteed success, because I'm not giving up until I get there. I may not get there this year or next year, but I'll get there. And I think that's the same for any goal, financial or otherwise.
Yeah. And what I love, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing all of that with the audience today. And, what I'm also hearing that I think a lot of times we lose sight of as well is that, sure, we all want to go from A to Z, and we want to do it as quickly as possible, right? And what I love about your story was that you also set very realistic goals for yourself along the way, right? So you guys heard Kristy say, she had one version of her vision board, realized she checked that off her list, and then she kept going, right? So it's not that there's this ceiling that you hit and you're done. It's a continuous process of breaking through what that next ceiling is. Mm-hmm. And what I would love for you to speak to a little bit more is, how did you pick yourself up, out of the basement, literally, to get yourself, knowing the feelings that you're having? Because I know so many of the women listening today too are, they can't get out of their own way. They, their minds are telling them it's not possible for them. So what was that catalyst that shifted your mind to say, this is going to happen for me?
I think any other outcome was unacceptable. I think that's what it really came down to. And I think with any situation, you have to look at what you're willing to accept for yourself, for your future, for your family, for whatever it happens to be. And I was not willing to let those kids down. I was not willing to live that life. I'd always been a hard worker. Even in my 20s, it was 3 or 4 jobs always at a time. But it wasn't so much about the time and the effort I was willing to put in. It was about just resetting what was acceptable for me. What do I want for my life, and what am I willing to go for or go without. I think that was really the key.
Yeah. Well, and I think that so many of us set, I love that you're using the words like, accepting that that wasn't an option for you. I've talked about this before, is that, there was a time where I completely doubted being able to leave corporate and to start my own business. And, and I remember having a conversation with someone where I had said, oh my God, what am I doing? Am I crazy? I still need to keep a roof over these kids' heads. Like, my alimony and child support isn't going to afford my life. Like, how am I going to do this? And I remember having a conversation with someone where they said, Wendy, when have you ever name one time where you have ever, bet on yourself and you haven't exceeded your goals, that you haven't exceeded your expectations? And I think that especially with divorce, you feel like a failure, right? So you think that the one thing that most of us identify the most with, right, as mom, or even as wife, that you feel like you failed. You talked about, both of your kids and crying and having to take them to childcare. I'm sure you also had failure running in your mind outside of just like failure, maybe of financial stability, but also as mom and all these other roles.
Absolutely.
So how did that translate? Like, how did your inner dialogue, your inner critics, your inner negative voices, how did you transition those to your roles as mom and daughter and all these other areas of your life as you were creating something new for yourself?
Yeah, I think that fear of, you really need to reset your vision for where you want to go, and I think it's the same with divorce, right? You had a vision for your future, you had a plan, and right. That plan has now changed,
right?
Which I think is scary, as with any change. You have to make some sacrifices at the beginning. I think, you can't be all things at all times. But I think it's really key to choose the items that will make the biggest change. What are those one or two things that you can focus on? Because you can't, at that time, I couldn't be the best mom and build the future. I couldn't do all the things. There's only so many hours in a day. But you choose the one or two things that if you achieve that, will have the ripple effect, that will have that trickle down, and it will solve most of the other things, right? So for me, it was hitting that level of financial success would give me more time, with the kids, would solve a lot of other problems along the way. And I think regardless of what the situation is, if you can choose those one or two big things to focus on that will give you the most impact, that's really the way forward.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that, because I hear so often that people are like, I just want balance. I want to be everything to everybody. Creature. Isn't it? I'm like, it's a unicorn. It's a magical unicorn with pink sparkles and, rainbows. I'm not trying to joke, but I am also kind of letting people know, I'm kind of the truth bomb queen. Like, balance, the way that I describe balance is it's a teeter-totter, right? So it's not that you're constantly straight all the time. You are literally going like this, and those of you listening, I'm tilting my body back and forth. Like, you're literally going up and down on each side all the time. And to me, that is balance, right? Is giving your all when it needs it at that time. And then you get to shift and whoop, here we go. We're going to the other side, and I appreciate you saying that, because balance does not mean you're everything to everybody at all moments of the day. Balance means that sometimes you have to make some really hard choices that will balance out in the end, right? Like, one day it will all get there. But in that particular given moment, there are sacrifices that have to be made. And, and I believe at the end of the day, as long as your kids know that they love you, that you create safety and security for them, as long as they feel safe and secure, right? And there's some consistency for them, they will thrive. And sometimes that means that mom can't be home all the time.
Yeah. And I think there's this perception that the balance means equal, right? It means
correct.
Equal time on work, equal time on family. And I don't think that's balance. I think balance is finding what that strategy is, what that that percentage is that creates, harmony and fulfillment and, peace for yourself. And you're right. It's going to shift. It's never going to be stable, but it may never be equal either. It's just finding that harmony for yourself in your situation.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that. I love that you use that word harmony. That's really resonant with me. And what also comes up for me around this too, that, I hope people are listening, is that, I think we live in a society where instant gratification is granted because of our phones and social media and all these things, right? And so many times we don't have, I believe that we don't have the patience that we once used to, because it's like, well, I want it now. If it's not happening now, like you guys heard Kristy say, like one of her vision boards, it took her 1.5 years to get there. Yeah. Right. So what I always say is that, and what I think you used as a beautiful example is that you had your vision, right? So you knew where you were headed. You knew that you would create that. So everything you did was in, the mindset of having achieved that goal already. I'm using quotation marks. And so talk a little bit about how that vision board, right? Having that vision of what is ahead of you keeps you in that forward momentum and helped you with your mindset.
Yeah. Well, there's some great books on this too. And the way that the mind works and why vision boards work. Jack Canfield is a great one. Success Secrets. Love his stuff. And he explains the whole, mental scientific aspect of it. But, I like having that vision reminds you constantly, and you've got to have it out somewhere where you can see it, but it reminds you of what's possible and what you're working toward. I mean, that's at the most basic level. I just heard something the other day, which I thought was really fantastic, from Mel Robbins, which was that not only do you want to envision the future and have that beautiful kind of end game on your wall. And I think this would have been helpful to me at the time and would certainly be helpful to people doing it now. You also want to envision the work that's going to get you there and the work that you're going to do when you get there. You want to envision the tough stuff as well. So, if my goal was the $1 million in the business, then, what is that going to, what's the hard work that goes along with that? So that when you hit those tough spots toward getting to your goal, you're prepared for them. You've envisioned it. You've worked through it already in your head. Which I thought was a really fantastic kind of addition to the general vision board and mindset aspect.
Yeah. And I think that, from what you just described, and there's so many great books out there. All of us have done this with guidance, right? We've all, the way that us being where we are today didn't come to us easily, right? Is the lesson in this, is that there are strategies, there are ways, but at the end of the day, what is truly most important is having that vision. I get on the phone with a lot of women where, one of my questions is like, what is the life that you really want to have? And every single one of them goes, I have no idea. Because, as little girls, we had great imaginations, but then as we get older, we just start getting into, the day to day, and it's like checking stuff off of our list, and we kind of forget what dreaming gets to look like. How did you get yourself to a place where, you allowed yourself to dream and to dream big?
I think it was a process. I was so timid with that first board. It was really small goals. And I think it's been a process as I've reached each goal. It's given me a little bit of an expansion and a little more of an expansion to kind of trust in myself that I can do whatever it is that I put on there. Now that I've gotten to the point where my dreams are huge and I'm not scared of them because I know I'm not giving up. So I'll get there eventually. If it takes 20 years, it takes 20 years, but I'll get there. I will succeed. And I really strongly believe that as long as you have that end game, as long as you have that vision, as long as you're heading in that direction, even if they're tiny little steps, teeny tiny steps, as long as they're headed in the right direction, you're going to get there. Yeah. So that's one of the other, really powerful things about the vision board is that as soon as you decided where it is you're headed, just keep going in that direction. Every day, tiny steps, you'll get there.
100%. And I know that there's women out there going, well, now is not the right time.
It's never the right time.
It's never the right time, right?
Also a mythical creature.
A total mythical creature. And I don't know if this analogy lands with you, but I've used this before where I'm like, were you really ready to have a child? Because I sure as hell wasn't ready to have a kid. It was like, well, we should probably get on the bandwagon. Like, we're the last to have kids. We should probably have some kids so that our kids grow up and have friends, with our friends. And, it was one of those things. And I always say, well, you're pregnant for 9 months for a reason, to get yourself in that place. So what would you say? What would you say to somebody who's literally saying to themselves right now, well, now's not the right time for me to make this transition, or now is not the right time, or, they're going through that inner dialogue?
It was just that. It really is never the right time. And I think, it doesn't need to be whatever it is that you're doing. I mean, specifically from my perspective, from a business standpoint, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough, right? So, get it good enough and then get it going. So as soon as you're at the stage where you can see that it's possible to move it forward, move it forward. Because the right time is it's always going to be a month away or a year away, or, we procrastinate there's so many reasons, lack of confidence, lack of support. There's always going to be great reasons not to do it, but you've got, better reasons to do it. So move it forward.
Well, and what I'm hearing you say is that action breeds more action, right? Absolutely. It's just that the definition or like the vision of what that action looks different each step. I was talking with a client earlier today, and, she was going through one of the exercises that they're working on this week. And, she kept saying like, I couldn't do it this way. I couldn't do it this way. And I just said to her, I said, well, who said it has to look that way? I didn't say it had to look that way, right? Absolutely. We tell ourselves these stories that it has to look a certain way, and it doesn't. What's important is that you take that first step.
Yes.
Because without that step, what are you doing? You're stuck. You're immobile.
And I think once you start moving forward, everything's going to shift and evolve. It's not going to work the way you thought it was going to work. You're not going to get the reaction you thought you were going to get, whatever it happens to be. But once you start moving it forward, you're not going to know that until you start moving forward. So once you start moving forward, then you can reevaluate, you can adjust. You're going to find out that all of those things you thought you needed to do before you could start aren't even necessary, so just start moving forward.
Yeah. And part of that dialogue too, is that like, well, I have to know this to be able to do this. And I have to know that to be able to do that.
Right.
Should we open the curtain to everyone and tell them what it really looks like?
You never know.
Yeah. You don't always have it figured out, right? We don't know, right? I tell people, they're like, well, I have to have all this laid out. I'm like, no, you don't. You just need to say that, you've got this, or that you want to do this, and then you do it. You don't have to have everything figured out already.
And then right? once you think you know all the things you thought you needed to know, you find out there's a whole bunch of other things that that nobody told you about.
Exactly. Right. And it's I love what you just said too, because it really is, it's a learning process. You didn't know everything. I sure as hell didn't know everything. I was literally building my company going, okay, I should talk to somebody and ask, like, am I doing this right? Because I'm doing it. It's like, there's a line in a movie. It's like, I'm flying blind, man. I'm flying blind. Like sometimes you have to, and you figure it out after the fact. Right.
And that's actually what really led me to starting She Corporated in the end. Cause after I started all of those businesses, and we all do the University of Google, right? It's like, Google, how do I register a business, and how do I do a marketing plan? And I thought,
exactly,
this is ridiculous. Like millions of people have started businesses before us. And after, why are we starting from scratch every single time? So that's actually why I started the company. I was like, we just need to get this all in one place to give women the confidence to, do what they need to do, to take simple steps. It's all laid out, because the University of Google is, I'm telling you,
You can get lost. It's like too much information is sometimes really bad for you.
Well, and is it good information? That's always
right.
Good too, right?
100%. Yes. Yeah. Is it? Yeah. And I'm glad we kind of segued into this because I do want you to share about your business and your company because, speaking as a fellow entrepreneur and somebody who had no idea what she was doing as she was building her business. I built businesses within companies, but I didn't have to worry about anything. I just went and got the money and I brought it in. And now I'm like, wait, I also have to build the infrastructure. And I know that especially women going through divorce, the financial aspect is so incredibly intimidating in that arena, let alone the thought of like, holy crap, how do I even start a business? Like I couldn't even handle, reading my tax return and knowing what was what there. So talk a little bit about how it is that you help women to start and also scale their business.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so, like I was saying with the businesses before, I after that first couple of businesses, I started several after that. And I just found it was such a process to get the information and to start from scratch every time. And I think for women specifically, there's a lot of barriers to starting their own businesses. Some of them are internal, some of them are external. I think, most women struggle with confidence aspect. We tend to play it safe, play it small. Mm-hmm. Very few women hit $1 million in their business. Very few women go over $100,000 in their business. A lot of women start businesses, in fact, more than men, but very few actually grow them to any great size. We just tend to kind of play it a bit safer. There's support issues, like it or not, generally we are in charge of the kids, in charge of the house, et cetera. So, there's less time in a day. And I think even if you have the confidence and you have the support, then there's issues getting financing. I don't know the exact percentages, but I know, women account for, I think it's 2 to 5% of all, venture capital investments. So 95% of that funding goes to men. So there's all sorts of issues with women starting business. But for the confidence one specifically, that's what I wanted to tackle. I wanted to lay out a framework where any woman that wanted to start her own business would have the confidence that she wasn't missing steps. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what questions to ask when you've never done it before. So we worry that we're going to miss an important step, or we're not going to set it up properly, or we're not, doing it right. So we literally took right from the idea stage to validating the idea, to registering the business, to launching the business, and then to the growth as well, step by step, so that, you can go through, just follow the steps. And it doesn't matter what kind of business it is. They're the same basic steps, the same basic, the marketing plan, setting up your social media, all of the things that we all need when we start a business. And then you can have the confidence that you have a solid base for growth as well. Because I really think that, the entrepreneurship is really a path to freedom. And that's our
Amen.
mission. Yeah, that's our mission. It's creating freedom through success in entrepreneurship. It reduces dependence on anything else. If you've got your own successful business, you make the rules. You write your ticket. You decide how you live your life. And for some women, that's just a matter of being able to live their dreams. And for other women, that can get them out of terrible situations. So whatever that freedom looks like for you, that's what we're trying to help you achieve. So that's the goal.
Love it. I love it. What would you say to somebody right now who's thinking to themselves, God, I wish I could do this. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not the right, I don't know that I could do this. What would you say to them?
That anybody can, and that's as long as you're willing to keep going, keep heading in the right direction. Your journey is your journey. So it may take you a couple of years to get from start to finish. You may, do it in a couple of months, who knows? But if it's your dream and it's worth working towards, then you absolutely can do it. Yeah.
As we're closing up our conversation today, what is one piece of advice you would have given yourself before all of this happened? What's something that you know now that you wish you could tell your younger self today?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it would have been what I learned along the process, which was just to set the goal and work toward it. and accept nothing less. In all areas, not even, not just business success, but really to set the goal and decide what's acceptable and just keep moving towards that. You don't stop when you hit a stage that's, okay and comfortable. That's the goal. That's where I'm going. And I don't stop between here and there.
So powerful, Kristy. So incredibly powerful. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I truly admire everything that you've done. I can only imagine, how proud your kids are of you too. And, having been witness to the growth that you've had. Thank you for being my guest today.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Of course. And you guys, Kristy, I also would love for you to share with everybody, how can they find you? How can they get more information about She Corporated? And I know you also have a free gift for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really the hub for everything is just shecorporated.com. And we've got links there we do a free 5-day business kickstart bootcamp. We do it a few times a year. So we always have a running list. It's free 5 days with me and with other coaches and with other people in the community. So you can sign up for that at the site. We've got a community that you can join of other women in exactly the same situation starting out, where we get to support each other. And that's on shecorporated.com. And then we've got a ton of free downloads. Actually, there's about 5 different really great templates. And there's marketing plan template there. And there's a vision board kit, which I think after the episode today would be a great thing to go download. It's got all of the words and the pictures and the instructions on how to do it. And that's all downloadable for free on the site on shecorporated.com.
That's awesome. I'm going to go check that out myself. I love vision boarding. I do it at the start of every year myself. So what a great resource to have something like a kit done for you. That's really, really wonderful. Kristy, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, of course. And everybody tuning in. Oh my goodness, what an amazing episode. You guys know that I strive every single week to provide you guys with information that is going to help you navigate your process wherever it is that you guys are in your healing and recovery path. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sending you all tons of love, light, and joy as always. Mwah. Bye, everybody.